The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, this is actually the first time that I've gotten to dive into this subject matter on the show, so I absolutely love the opportunity to be able to do it. Definitely a dark conversation for the first half, diving into the one that everybody has been talking about lately, Lilith. But on the second half, of course, we end up diving into some Sasquatch experiences. So, of course, we end up leaving on a light note, but fascinating all the same. Range of experiences from today's guests. And I think you guys are thoroughly going to enjoy all of this. But just a couple of quick things in case you ended up missing it on the last episode. First and foremost, I am trying to put together an investigation team for the Michigan/Detroit area. So if you might be interested in possibly doing something like that, I'm looking for people that dive into ufology, cryptozoology, and of course the paranormal. I wanted to create an all-together team and hopefully get together for monthly investigations. So again, if you're interested in something like that, there is a Google form down in the show description. You got to fill out the application for that, and I'm going to try to kind of go through that within the next couple weeks and figure out who exactly I might be interested in including in on the team and everything. And beyond that, as I've been mentioning in the last couple episodes, there's going to be new changes coming into the new year. First and foremost, of course, is that I'm going to keep the ad breaks to 5, which is exactly what you have to do for Spreaker in order to stay monetized on there. Hopefully you guys understand, I got to pay for all these different programs and everything like that I try to use for the show. So again, no matter how long the episode is, whether it's an hour, whether it's 2 hours, and even if it goes into 3 hours, I'm going to make sure I only keep it to that 5 ad break minimum, of course, for you guys. I might load it up at the end after the end outro and all that kind of stuff, but that kind of stuff's totally irrelevant because it won't interrupt the show whatsoever, of course. And another change that I'd like to do to the show is kind of bring it back to the roots a little bit, expand what the topic base is for the conversations on the show. I've kind of pushed mainly into the creature aspect of things, and I'd like to expand back to where I used to be when I first started the show. So that being said, if there's anybody that might be interested in coming on the show and having a conversation about either bizarre encounters or experiences, research on fringe topics and or conspiracies, spiritual teachings or philosophy, folklore or family stories, ancient civilizations or hidden history, the occult and or secret societies, geopolitics or government conspiracies, or any other open-minded topic, shoot me a message. Let's set something up. I'd absolutely love to have you on the show. And of course, in addition to that, I would love to collaborate a little bit more with some other podcasters. So if you're another podcaster out there and you guys would like to dive into any topic that I've covered on the show at any point, or simply just have an open-minded conversation and see where it goes, you guys can always hit me up and we can definitely set something up for that too, of course. And I will be booking again for January and February. So if anybody's interested in setting anything up for then, again, just shoot me a message any way that you guys can get a hold of me. And the last thing, before we get into the show, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if anybody has an encounter or experience they would like to share on the show, or possibly have me investigate, you guys can email me at, again, inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text the hotline, leave a voicemail, whatever you guys want to do. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you didn't catch that number, it of course is available down in the show notes. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available on the link tree, which again is also available down in the show notes. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Bennet Tanton from Broadcasting Seeds. How's it going today, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure to have you come on the show after actually you sending me an email. And I don't know if you sent it purposefully or if it may have been something that was attached to the blog, but you're talking about some of your encounters, and that ended up kind of sparking up some conversation where it kind of led into today and getting into the show we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I don't remember. I do remember obviously having that, but I think it was kind of like hey, I've had this experience, and it wasn't necessarily to be on the show. And then you asked me, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. So, I'll never give up a chance to, get on a podcast and talk.
See, that's how I go with the encounter report stuff is whenever somebody submits one, the first question I always ask is like, do you want to come on the show and share it? Because some people, they just want to type it out, kind of leave it there. Other people, they're excited to come on the show and talk about it. So, I always try to take the opportunity. And I know the one you mentioned today, at least, and we're going to dive into a bunch of other stuff, is something that a lot of people have been talking about lately, which is Lilith. And that's why it ended up sparking my attention because I was like, all right, this one seems like it might lead into some good conversation.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So...
But I guess before we get into your encounters, because I know we were talking about them before, you got a bunch ranging from paranormal stuff to Sasquatch, so we're definitely going to run the gambit on all this stuff. But for anybody that may not be familiar with what Broadcasting Seeds is and what exactly you dive into, I want you to let them know a little bit of background about yourself so we can kind of lay a little bit of the groundwork.
Okay. So I have a podcast called Broadcasting Seeds. I mean, there's also a blog and all the social media that goes along with that too, right? And basically we talk about stuff like you guys talk about on this show. It's kind of runs the gamut of just high strangeness in general, cryptids, conspiracy. Man, I really get into the conspiracy theory stuff.
Oh yeah, you and me both, man. It seems like the listeners enjoy that stuff the most because whenever I do conspiracy episodes, even on my other cryptid show, those always end up being the top episodes.
So like one of my top episode on like YouTube right now is the Ingersoll Lockwood books about Donald Trump and Barron Trump. You know these books that I'm talking about?
Yeah, the one where it was like the premonition story where they were like guessing stuff ahead of time.
Well, it's
I heard
Barron
vaguely
Trump's
about it,
underground adventure, right? And either way, so it kind of delves into like some stuff with that. It's prophetic in an instance. And then there's another book by Ingersoll that was published 3 years later called The Last President. And it's kind of spooky too, man. There's just like all kinds of stuff. But anyway, conspiracy, but also like, is this dude a time traveler? How does this, who knows, right? Or is he just making stuff up that just happens to come true? Right?
Well, I guess a quick side tangent, because I don't think I've ever actually talked about this on the show, and I know it's not going to be the main focal point or nothing, but if you kind of want to give a little bit of background on it, just because it hasn't been talked about on the show before.
So it's 2 books. I mean, the author's name is Ingersoll Lockwood. He's actually from New York State. That's what set this whole thing off for me. Is he is from a town over like in Westchester area, so down by the city, but not in the city, on the other side of the Hudson, right? And then he ended up living and dying, and he was like he was a lawyer for a while, did some, then became a lecturer, and he wrote these books. So he lived in Saratoga Springs. It fell into my lap one time, and I was like, wait a minute, this is crazy. Like this was years ago. And then once Donald Trump came to,
that was the last time I heard about this stuff was during his last presidency, and I haven't heard anything about it since. So I'm glad you brought this back up because I forgot about this.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's interesting, right? But where you get into the conspiracy part too is like, how does this lock in with like Nikola Tesla and stuff? Because people talk about time travel when it comes to this, right? Because of the underground adventure stuff, it gets spicy. It's really hard to get into because it's thick, man. You kind of have to read the books or listen to a podcast on somebody that's way more articulate than me talking about it. You know what I'm saying? Off the top of my head. But there are just some coincidences that are eerie. And at the end of the day, It's worth looking into and doing your research. I mean, this is kind of what we do on my podcast. It's called Broadcasting Seeds. It's all about planting seeds in people's minds so they'll get curious, right? And at the end of the day, I don't get down and deep and like do deep dive stuff because, well, not yet. I mean, I do sometime with guests, but I kind of like to keep it as like wave tops, so it intrigues people.
Tip of the iceberg, kind of get them into it.
Yeah, wave tops. Like do your own research, because I can tell you stuff all that you want, but I could be completely full of crap, So, which is probably a good guess, but at the end of the day, it's about expanding people's minds to an extent. I mean, my background is I'm a military. I was in the military for 10 years. I was a Marine, and then I got out of the Marine Corps. I was a cop for about a year. Not built to be a police officer. Got out of that and went back in the military, into the Army though. And I was a door kicker in the military, just infantry guy, little bit of special operations stuff, but nothing like, Delta Force or any crazy stuff like that. But I have a skeptic. I'm a skeptic at heart, because some of this stuff is so out there, bro, that you don't want to believe it necessarily, but then you start digging into the things and you're just like, ugh. So this was years ago, right? This all started for me.
I always find it really ironic that so many people in this sphere are ex-military, because it's like everybody's like, trust the government, but how come everybody that's worked for the government's like, don't trust the government?
And so I got out of the military, and then I worked for the government for the better part of another decade. I was an Air Force civilian working anti-terrorism stuff for Northern Command, and then I worked for the Veterans Administration for years and years as a peer support specialist, doing all kinds of, and I just dove right into like all the woo-woo Reiki and everything, man. Like, all the different therapies and whatnot. I've been open to this type of stuff for a long, long time. But yes, I think it's because the veil has been kind of pulled back a little bit. There's some stuff when I was in the military that was just shady, man. Like, you're like, what? That's not quite right. Like, conspiracy wise. I'm not going to go into details about it, but like stuff that you're just like, makes you go, huh. Hindsight's 2020, and especially with 9/11 and things like that, you're just like, man, that ain't right. Like something's fishy here, right?
I've only heard of one vet that I've talked to personally that believes 9/11, the story that they're told. Like every single person I've talked to that was a vet, especially people that were in the military around that time, they're like, no, that was off. Yeah. There's something up with that.
Yeah, something. It wasn't even the part of 9/11 itself, right? It wasn't the actual attacks and how that all went down. That was the issue with me. It was a lot of the aftermath, like how we went into Afghanistan and how some things went down with troop deployments and stuff. Say, I was in Egypt during 9/11. I was there for about a year and change. So when 9/11 happened, I was watching it on TV in Egypt. It's crazy, unbelievable, and that's a hell of a situation all on itself, because then once we invaded Afghanistan, we had protesters.
I can only imagine the fear of not being like on your own country's ground when something that happens, because it's like you don't know what turmoil is about to happen. Like it feels like, I don't want to say the calm before the storm, but like after that moment happens and that in between period before the next step happens, if you're not home or you're in the military, like I can only imagine like the fear of what could potentially become next.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were technically it was and I'll do this with air quotes, peacekeeping mission.
That close to Egypt, though, or you being in Egypt, being that close to the area.
We're literally sitting on the Israeli-Egyptian border. People don't understand that there's. I don't know what you're. You probably have a lot of people in your audience that were in the military, but for folks that aren't, and this is one of these rabbit holes, we'll just go down it right, just real quick. We have an entire unit. So at any given moment, there is a brigade of infantry troops sitting in Egypt on the Israeli border. And they're part of a force called the Multinational Force and Observers, which is made up of somewhere between 11 and 13 different countries, everything from Japan to Colombia to us to the Brits, New Zealand, Uruguay. There's so many different countries, right? And there are 3 different infantry battalions that are it's broken up into 3 sectors, and you've got one that's run by the Americans, one that's run by the Colombians, and one that's run by the Fijians. Yeah, Fiji has an army. And people are like, wait, what? Yeah. So you have, and that's the way it's been for the better part of about 20 years. And you just have units that rotate in and out of that, right? It's nuts. So gorgeous area, really cool, but people have no idea. So like when people make it, technically it's a combat zone. I mean, as you can imagine, it's not like anything crazy is going down, but there's always that like threat of it going down. I mean,
just always on high alert because you never know what
you have
could
to be.
come.
Yeah, and your whole job is to watch. I mean, as we know, I mean, things kick off there all the time, right? So either way, that was a crazy mission, but it was and we were there during 9/11, so that was definitely crazy. But a lot of people don't realize. So go down that hole, kind of like a conspiracy, but it's out in the open. It's just not something that's talked about, right?
Which it seems like sometimes the best place to hide things is in plain sight. If you kind of just throw out your cards and act like it's not anything suspicious, a lot of people just end up looking right over it.
Absolutely. So yeah, so that's my background and then since then I spent 11 years in the nuclear industry. I was nuclear security for a couple different companies, and then I couldn't carry a gun for a living anymore, man, and I got out of it, and that's when I went back to work for the VA, and basically trying to help guys and gals not unalive themselves, among other things, and but now I've transitioned out of that pretty much, and I've been an entrepreneur, I guess you would say, or at least a freelancer, whatever you want to call it, entrepreneur. It still feels weird to call myself that, but it's for the better part of about 10 years. So I do work for other people, but it's on a contract basis. So yeah. And then this podcasting craziness, I've been doing podcasts since like 2014. So about 10 years, right?
10 years. Wow, man.
Yeah. Not this podcast. There's been many iterations of podcasts, but some were fun. Some were, we made some money and sold some things, and it was good.
That's growth and learning, though, man. It's part of the learning curve. I mean, it's just good to see people stick with it, because a lot of people start a podcast, realize how much work it is, and then just drop it after that first show. Like, I'm always happy to see people stick around and do this kind of stuff for a while.
Right. And or come in and out of it. Like, this is probably, I think, because I've got these podcasts that I'm doing now, and I think I've had like six podcasts total that were like mine, right? So pretty cool. It's fun, and I would love to do it for a living, and I kind of do now. That's kind of the glory of this whole thing. So
It's all about time and finding that niche, it seems like, because most people aren't able to do this kind of stuff full time until it seems like about 7 years in seems to be kind of be the average for a lot of podcasters.
Absolutely. And or like, so many people don't even make it to 20 episodes. I mean, if you're
I always heard the 30 episode rule. Like, if you made it 30 episodes, like, you just got to keep chugging along. That's the hardest battle, is making that first 30.
And as soon as you do that, you're like in the top 1%, man. You've made it farther. Seriously, you've made it farther than like 99% of all other podcasts, because there's so many dead podcasts. It's like, I understand them holding things in perpetuity, but that's like, you might want to start offing some of these things that have been sitting there for stagnant for 6-7 years. Like, I have episodes from old podcasts that are like, they live on YouTube forever.
I mean, I feel like part of that, though, might just be people just trying to save their work in a weird way, because I don't know, I haven't like full on stopped any like podcasts. I've like had like mini shows and stuff I've kind of brought into the fold of like my shows, but my main feeds have been constant since I started. But I think even if I did theoretically stop one of those, I don't know, like, especially if it's like a deep dive show where it's like the context can kind of be used either way. Like, if it's a news show, obviously, like, once the information's passed, like, it's kind of useless at that point. But if you're doing like, covering like books, or you're covering cryptid cases, stuff like that, it's kind of stuff that can kind of live in the ether and people can kind of pick it up at any time, and it doesn't necessarily like go stagnant. Depends on the show. I
mean, it is cool. It is cool that it does, but there's podcasts that have like 3 episodes, and they're on Apple Podcasts forever.
Dude, I got one that I have Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin. I've been running that show for about 3 years now, and some other podcasts popped up that want to call themselves Bizarre Encounters Podcast. They did like 4 episodes, and now it's just sitting there. But whenever people look stuff up, it like messes up all of my stuff, and I'm just dude, you could have just looked up the name and saw another show had that name and picked something more original. Like, it drives me crazy when people see, you can't just come up with a name for a podcast and not search it on the internet. Like, I guarantee you knew another show existed with that name and you still said fuck it and went with it.
And you have like no regress because you don't have it trademarked or anything. So, right.
And it's because, I mean, it's such a generic, I want to say generic, but like Bizarre Encounters, like those words are just, so
exactly.
It'd be hard to copyright them anyways, because it's an expression, like
it is. Correct.
So I had to add the with Shayn and Orin part. That's the differentiating factor right there.
Right.
But it drives me crazy because they only did like 3 episodes, and now it's just been sitting stagnant, and it's just like, delete your feed so it stops messing my stuff up.
And literally, probably whenever someone searches it, it probably goes right to theirs.
Dude, my entire Linktree profile stuff was going to theirs because it kept registering that way, and I'm just like, dude, really? Like, come on now.
That's super annoying.
But not to say it tied tangent too far off into podcasting and stuff. Got to bring it back in a little bit. But I know that I'm sure we're going to end up going off on a million side ventures tonight, because it just seems like we got a good interaction. We're going to end up getting into some rabbit holes and stuff. But
I can't shut my mouth with it. So it just is what it is.
Hey, good news is I'm the same way. So don't feel bad if we end up getting side tangent into something else. But at least to kind of bring it back into somewhat conversation and kind of get stuff rolling in some kind of direction. Originally, like I said, I wanted to have you on to talk about your Lilith encounters, and then I figured out, of course, you have SQUATCH encounters, which we're definitely going to dive into, but I want to make sure we leave room for the Lilith encounter, because once you get me going on SQUATCH, like, that's the end of the day on that one. But
that's it. It's over. It's all done.
I guess diving into the Lilith stuff, I don't know exactly where you want to start with it. I don't know if there's like a buildup of paranormal stuff that led to it, but wherever you want to start with it, man.
Well, yeah. So as a kid, I was, I didn't have the best childhood. It seems to kind of be the trend, right?
In this community too.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Which is probably why you question authority. I mean, I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand.
Correct. And also, because I was abused as a kid. And seems to be a common thread with stuff with Lilith, especially with men, right? So basically, the name Lilith, it really does evoke an array of emotions from people, right? Some mystery, some fear, rebellion, and this is centuries, right? That this that she's been demonized in some religious aspects and some mythological traditions as well. But in recent years, her story's kind of reclaimed like a deeper understanding, like with as like the female independence and the, down with the patriarchy and rebellion, right?
Do you kind of get into like the Hebrew context of like her origin and stuff more so? Because that's kind of like where I kind of end up going with it.
Like, but basically, she was kind of like Adam's first wife, right? That's one of the stories. You've got the Mesopotamian. Like, I can look down and actually look at. Myth goes that she refused to submit to Adam, asserting her equality and eventually leaving the Garden of Eden, but over time became associated with basically like night demons, seduction, untamed feminine power that refuses to be controlled. But it goes, I mean, she appears in Mesopotamian mythology as a night demon. Her influence is stressed to modern interpretations. Keep saying the same shit over and over again. So with my story, everyone's seen the movie The Ring.
Of course. And if you haven't, you at least know the images.
Yeah. So the image, unfortunately, for and like I say, this encounter, this has been something that's happened to me for quite a while. I mean, I've been married for 20 years, but it's one of those reoccurring things where I'll have nightmares, and it's about this entity, or this entity is in him constantly. And it looks like that. Sometimes I can see her face and sometimes I can't. Right. A lot of times it's almost always dream stuff. And it's always this woman in a that's the word. It's a shift, like the underclothes, and it's, you can literally say it's the girl from The Ring. Sometimes I can see her face and sometimes I can't. Sometimes her face is beautiful and other times it is very much not. Right. So this had been going on for a year, and literally in my dreams, not good things would happen, but I would have physical, like manifestation of symptoms and shit the next day. Sometimes I would have, like pain. Other times I would have, I guess you could even say like scratches and things like this. Right. Also weird stuff going on in my house, where I always felt a presence.
Hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
So I also had a near death, and just to give you this is, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but it's pertinent. I had a near death experience when I was in the military. I drowned a couple times.
Not to side tangent off on this one, but you got so many different things I want to dive into. If you bring up a near death experience, you at least, if you don't want to dive into it too far, you gotta, if you saw something, you at least gotta hopefully tell the story about what you saw.
So that's one of the things, unfortunately, I didn't. I say I had a near death experience, but I don't remember it. But
you get the feeling, but you don't remember, yes, but you knew that something happened.
It's like just beyond my reach. Like I can't see it or feel it. I remember because I was in North Carolina. I got drugged down by I was in reconnaissance, and we were finning, doing like a fin about a quarter mile offshore, just for physical training, right? But we were in full combat gear, and we waterproof our gear and we tie it off and drag it behind us as we fin, right? Well, I did not waterproof my stuff effectively that day, and it drugged me under. It sank and it drugged me down. So I was about 20, somewhere between 10 and 20 feet below the surface, and I could just see everything. And I was trying to cut the cord free, but I don't know why I couldn't. I just couldn't. Like everything stopped working. The knife wouldn't even, I got the knife out and I started cutting and it just wouldn't. It was like it was a butter knife, man. It was unbelievable. And it wasn't. That's the thing. It wasn't like a butter knife. It should not have been that thing. Then I remember everything coming in tunnel wise, but I was so peaceful after the initial freak out. I was so like peaceful, and I just remember everything coming down, and I could see the sun like coming through. Like literally it was like a scene from like the Little Mermaid to an extent, you know. You can see like the rays of the sun, and then it was lights out. Next thing I remember is being on the safety boat, just heaving over the side. So, you know, puking up salt water and everything else. Cause they had to do CPR on me. And ever since then, I've been able to see auras. So this is why I say I had a near-death experience, because something happened, right?
Some type of consciousness shift that you seem to be more aware of things.
So I can see, like, if I look at people, like I can't obviously through like cameras and stuff, but if I can see people in person, I can see colors. I could tell you exactly what type of mood they're in. I can tell you if they have pain and where they have it. Stuff like that, right? And also now I don't talk to, I wouldn't say I see dead people. It's not like sixth sense, but I definitely know when there's energy and entities around. I can feel it. So like I can walk into a house and tell you if it's haunted or not. So
it's like heightened awareness.
Yeah, heightened awareness. I wouldn't say I'm like a medium or anything. I can't communicate with, I just know.
It's something with energies, though. If you're able to see auras and you're able to feel things, it's definitely something that has to do with strictly energy.
It's energies and frequencies too, which are the same thing, basically, you know, because that's what even colors are, you know, vibration, frequency, all that stuff. I'm very heightened to it all, right? So with that being said, I know even when it comes in with cryptid hunting, I can tell you when something's in the woods. I just know it. I know. Because I can feel it, right? So we'll just kind of dive right into this. I was in my house, and you know, things have been coming up for years, literally above my bed, in my attic, which I don't have an attic, but I have a crawl space. I could just feel like there was something that would like camp out above my bed at night, my wife and I's bed. When I would wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you could literally hear, you know, I've gone up there and looked, do I have raccoons? Do I have stuff, you know, things in my crawl space? And I never did. Everything is just insulation, but I always felt like there was something. And then where I sit in my living room, I have a lazy boy chair, whatever the hell you want to call it, recliner. And I would get this, it was as though something was like following me around. But it would like camp out above me in this crawl space. That's the only way I can describe it, right? But it always felt this same type of like energy. And as crazy as it sounds, and trying to explain it to my wife was been a nightmare. it was, at the beginning of our marriage, but I don't necessarily like women. I love women. I'm a heterosexual male and I love women, but I don't like them. Does that make sense?
Like the energy?
And I was raised by a single mother basically. And I just always, my entire life, I felt like oppressed by women, which that's not a popular thing to say right now by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, it might somewhat be though, because maybe that's kind of where the push for masculinity is kind of coming back in, is because there's been such an oppression of masculinity. So it's
right. But this is different because it's been very personal, right? Like I've always felt this type of, I don't think it's like I felt it looking back 2020 now, years and years ago. I've always felt like, like just this pressure on me, and it was always from women, and it's bizarre, but it's just the feeling that I've always had.
It's hard to explain, but it makes sense to me, but it's like hard to explain in words. But I get what you're putting
It's really
down,
something I need to dive into more to like really figure out what it is. But it's like this, and I'll put it on this like Lilith, or this Lilith type entity energy. Literally that's how it feels. It's like it's an oppressive, like domineering type. I'm gonna have my way with you and there's nothing you can do about it. You know what I mean? I can imagine how like an abused woman feels when they have a domineering man. It's just reversed, right?
I mean, that kind of makes you wonder too, because it seems like Lilith comes up a lot with a lot of experiences and a lot of stuff that's like happening in today's world. But on the other side, like, not to get too far off into like weird kink shaming or anything like that, but it seems like the whole like oppression of men seems to have pushed into that being this weird sexual fetish for a lot of people. And I don't know, maybe it has something to do with like this presence of like these things coming back, or like being more dominant, or maybe it's even the fact that, we may not be helping and contributing to this by talking about her in this conversation and using her by name and stuff like that. So maybe it's like bringing it back, but depending on how you view these demonic entities and how strong they could potentially be, and if they can completely manipulate a society, which assumably Lilith has that ability, and that's why she's referenced in so many movies.
I have no doubt.
But I'm sure it plays a major role with the resurfacing of Lilith and what seems to be this like men weirdly being dominated by women concept. Like I feel like they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it's like we talk about entities being able to manipulate people, but they have to have, you've had to have somehow given consent, right? And
they find something that's like a little piece, and then they dwindle away at that and try to get in. Like they have to have their keyhole in order for them to turn the lock and try to get into your mind.
And I'm not going to lie. I think maybe it was, so like I said, I was abused as a kid, sexually abused as a kid. That right there is kind of a gateway, right? I mean, we could go down so many different rabbit holes of that with, whether, that opens gateways.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
ritualistic ideas with,
absolutely,
especially with the child and that trauma.
Here's the other thing. So I basically had my first sexual experience with a woman was when I was 12, right? And it felt so wrong when it happened, right? That I never, I didn't have any sexual stuff go on until I was not much older, but most 15-year-old 15-year-old boys are trying to get something going, and I had no interest because that first experience I had was so ruinous, I guess you could say, and also it was along these type of lines. Like I was just a piece of meat, man. And I didn't think about it at the time because you're just a young boy and you're like, oh yeah, I'm a man now. But I didn't feel that way. Right. So
was it consensual from like your perspective at that time? You don't have to get into details or nothing. But.
Yeah, for sure. It was, but it was just not, it was inappropriate. Let me put it that way. With the, and it wasn't because it wasn't like a, it was a younger girl, but she was way too old. Like she was 18, and I was 12, and it was just not, it was very manipulative. There was just a lot of weird.
I mean, it's still statutory at that point though. So I mean,
yeah, absolutely. But I'm not trying to, I'm just saying, yes, men can be sexually abused and assaulted as well, for sure. I guess it comes down to, it was just not it wasn't a good experience. Now, especially that I look back on it, it was very, who knows what kind of doors that opened in my mind.
On top of your previous trauma that kind of doubled on top of it.
Right. So not cool. But like I said, I've kind of had this whole energy for a long time. I also just had weird, I just never had real, healthy relationships with women. I just never did. And it was, and now that I look back and I've gone through a lot of therapy and I've analyzed a lot of this, it's just a lot of it comes down to this whole feeling with this, I would say like an oppressive Lilith type energy coming down on me, and being angry for no reason. And just it, and I've also heard other people tell these stories too. So it makes me realize I'm not the only one.
She looks for an archetype.
Yeah, she absolutely does. And yeah. And I feel like I was definitely influenced by this now that I look back. Right. So with that being said, this was, I'm trying to remember the exact date. You think I'd be able to. It was the end of September. I know that. So it was a random weeknight. So a lot of times I stay, how it is, man. You're up. You've got YouTube on in the background and you're editing episodes, right, to put out. And next thing I know, I fell asleep on the couch, and I can't remember. I had YouTube on in the background, but it wasn't. I can't remember what podcast I was watching on YouTube at the time. But when I woke up, I looked at the clock. It was exactly midnight, and the Confessionals podcast was on. And they were talking about Lilith. So I looked at I did my research. It was episode 657, Lilith Comes Calling. And it's with Justin from the Appalachian Intelligence podcast. I don't know if you know that podcast.
Yeah, I've had them on the show a long time ago, actually.
Yeah, so it was Justin was on, and he's had an encounter that was kind of similar-ish. But either way, I woke up. I was like, "Holy crap!" Shook off the fog, and I just felt off. Everything felt off when I got up. So I got up to get some water before I headed to bed. I shut off lights and stuff, and then I went over to grab some water and. To get from my living room to the kitchen, you walk like through my dining room area, and there's a double door, like French doors that go out onto my deck, which overlooks a woods. I have woods in the behind my house. So it's probably about an acre of just woods. Now, again, it was midnight, and I've lived here for about 5 years, and I had never, ever heard an owl hoot, not once. And I'm up, we have campfires, we have, we spend a lot of time out back, and I'd never heard an owl in 5 years. I heard this owl start hooting. Now, for those that don't know, owls are a symbol of Lilith.
Also wisdom, weirdly enough, too.
Also wisdom, correct, right? So, but it set me off, man. Like I could feel that something was out in those woods watching, like, and as soon as I heard that owl hoot, I turned and I looked out that door, and I knew that something was out there. I could feel it. And I basically burst out onto the deck and started, I consider myself a Christian. I'm not religious, but I'm Christian. I don't go to church. Let me put it that way. I'm not a fan of religion by any stretch of the imagination.
It seems like most people that are believers, like it's a back and forth. It's either one, it's like you don't agree with organized religion, but you still love the faith. And on the other side, it's like, it seems like a lot of the Christian circles are breaking away now, and they're kind of staying away from mainstream religion and forming these groups where it's more like we read the Bible and, adhere to the words, and they actually bring in all of this other weird stuff that normally wouldn't get talked about in normal church communities.
And I would never, it's like, can we not come to consensus? Or like, who cares? Like, the consensus, if it's not the word, it's not the word, right? And we fight over semantics way too easily. So I choose not to fight over any of that shit. So,
10 different people can read one line and totally see it 10 different ways. So that's kind of the harder aspect too, is that it's like when you got one guy that's just saying, this is how to feel about it, versus like, kind of how they kind of are restructuring some churches now, where it's more like everybody reads it together and kind of puts their thoughts and ideas on how they would understand it together. Like it gets somewhere a little bit better with it, in my opinion. Like, if you're trying to understand it as a whole, like, you don't want somebody just sitting there saying, this is how you should be understing this.
Right. Because then that whole authority thing goes
that's what I was going to say. It gets back into the whole, like, authority thing.
But I start rebuking this, whatever it is, this thing, in the name of God and Jesus and everything. And I just knew it wasn't wildlife, and I could feel it start retreating further into the woods. And as I spoke, then all of a sudden, it or something else literally let out this god-awful scream. And it was just, it scared the shit out of me. Like a wounded animal, basically, right? And if it was coincidence, it's a hell of a coincidence. It was super bizarre.
Hold on, guys. We have to take a break to pay some bills. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits, with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in. You picking up on energies, did you get any specific, like, energy kind of feel from this? Like, anger, like, I know you kind of described it as like a wounded animal, but with that other sense, did you kind of get a different feeling from this?
It was pissed. It was pissed. The energy was just mad. It was angry, right? Like, how dare I fight back, kind of. Because I never really thought about it. And I'm telling you that I had never really thought about spiritual warfare until about a month prior to this all going down, right? And I literally started doing things to protect myself, my house, and my family, right? More than just the cursory, like, saying the Lord's Prayer or blessings and stuff like that, but like really coming at something and trying to get rid of it, right? And there was I'm telling you, I think this was the like crescendo of this the climax of this whole movie, right? Was these two incidents. Everything coming to a head, and it finally kind of really like me fighting back and being like, no, this is not acceptable, right? I'm sick of this feeling. I'm sick of this whole nonsense. It was literally affecting my relationship with my wife. Like even to the things where it would be like, I wouldn't say like a porn addiction, but like, like I just had very intrusive thoughts.
That's what these things do. They try to wheedle themselves in.
Since I've done this, no intrusive thoughts anymore. They're all gone. So go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off, but
oh no, that's all I was gonna say. I feel like these things try to like, they'll find a little piece where they can kind of keep breaking stuff away, and then they'll kind of wheedle their way into your brain and into your mind, and they try to get to a point where it's like you can't separate yourself from this thing that's attached to you. And especially with like Lilith too. I mean, I've heard a lot of different stories that she kind of has like her minions and things like that. So I kind of feel like she kind of, because there's so many people that have experiences with her, I feel like she almost has these like groundwork minions that'll kind of go out and like kind of lay the groundwork. And then once they know that they're starting to chip away at somebody, that's when like she starts making her presence.
Yeah. Cause I mean, part of she's the queen of demons, man. I mean, that's one of her job titles, right? The mother of demons, or whatever they want to call it, I
mean, people try to look at all these different origin stories and they say like, this one's right, this one's right, this one's right. But yeah, I mean, they could all theoretically be true together, and it's just different pieces of the story.
Correct. And new identities because think about it, you have entities all throughout time that have switched. I mean, it could be as simple as thinking about like the pantheons of gods, right? Across the ages, whether they're Roman, they're Greek, they're whatever, they're all the same, right? The pantheons all had very similar things. Even the Hindus to the Greek gods. It's just funny that the god of storms and thunder always ends up being, the man at the top, whether it's Zeus or it's Thor or it's, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's why a lot of people kind of believe, right, looking at it from the Christian perspective, that these other bodies of gods are actually like the fallen angels, and they come down and then they start giving this information. If you look at it from that perspective, like it completely makes sense, because what did these gods start giving people? They started giving them like tools to fight with. They started giving them knowledge that they weren't necessarily supposed to have. So like it fits that paradigm, and that's, I can't say it enough. I think that all of these things that people mark as mythology combines in with all of these religions, and it's not that any particular single one is correct, but they all have different vantage points of the same events happening, and with different groups they give different names to things. I mean, even we're going to dive into Sasquatch later, but just in North America, how many different names are there for Sasquatch? Like these beings that don't necessarily have a name, they just exist, and then people give them names, and then they get power from those names. But they don't want to hold themselves to one name, because now it's like, I can collect power now from these 10 different names that people are all calling me, because they're all correct. I go by all of these
streams, right? I've got multiple revenue streams, just different strokes for different folks, right? So it's like it's big G God and little G gods. It's kind of, that's how I look at it all. Right. And there is cohesion across those things. But either way, with that being said, I feel like this is what I'm fighting at this point. And scared the crap out of me, the scream. But then I just like felt, I was like, all right, it's time to go inside. So I went inside, shut the door, locked the door, and I felt okay. Like, I felt like safe to an extent. I was freaked out, of course, but I felt like, all right, I'm going to bed. So I went upstairs. I laid there and scrolled on my phone and finally went to sleep to no other issues that night. But when I woke up in the morning, it's probably around 8 a.m. I went outside to put a cover back on my smoker that I had smoked some meat the day before and I had to let it cool off. And, I was going to put the smoker back, the cover back on the smoker because it was supposed to rain. But I turned on that podcast episode onto my phone and I was listening to it because I wanted to hear the rest of it. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. But I was listening to it outside doing this. And I had it on speaker because I wanted to hear it. And within 2 minutes of playing it, I put the cover back on, I turned around, this freaking owl starts hooting during the day, bright, 8:30 in the morning, starts hooting. Can't see it, but I can hear it, right? And I'm just like, coincidence?
Or divine intervention. It could go either way. Either one, she wanted you to be aware of who she was, or on the other side, it was divine intervention and, God, the angels, whatever perspective you want to view it from, wanted you to be aware of what you were dealing with. No matter what,
possibly,
it happened for a reason.
But either way, the words that came out of my mouth initially, as soon as I went, there's that bitch again. That's exactly what I thought. And I was like, okay, all right, this is how this is going to go down. So uneventful things, the next few days go on with without a hitch, regular stuff. But a few nights later, things escalated. And I had a really, really, really bad nightmare.
She was sitting and skewing because you called her a bitch. She was like, all right. I'm going to come back in a couple days. I'm going to sit on this one.
So this entity totally invaded my body. It was really bad. Just abusive too. Not just in a sexual manner, but physically abusive in the dream. Right. And brought back so much shame and just guilt and all these emotions, just horrible, bro. Absolutely horrific nightmare, right?
Almost working like a succubus almost. And I've heard a lot of people kind of describe Lilith a lot like a succubus.
The energy. Absolutely just horrifically bad. And so I wake up exactly at 3:49. And the reason I know is I literally, we have a clock right next to our bed. I rolled over. I regularly wake up between 3 and 5 anyway. So what do you want to call that? The last watch, the witching hour? I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. I regularly wake up, and it's when I pray and I, breathe and do all the things, right? Just to give myself power. But at this time, it wasn't like I was practicing that stuff every single day, right? So I was still educating myself. But 3:49 a.m. Now, that specific time stuck with me too, even after all this rest of this went down, and I couldn't shake it. So I got up, I went to the bathroom. I could hear the freaking creaking nonsense in the roof above me. So I was like, oh shit. It actually scared me, I went back to bed though and tried to go back to sleep, but I was overwhelmed with just sense of dread. As if the energy from the, dream just it literally did. And I pulled my phone out and I started saying a prayer of protection, right? trying to shake off this feeling. And as I recited the prayer, I got just chills all over my body, man. And just like, it was like a visceral reaction within me. As if seriously, I was like expelling something. It's one of the craziest feelings. Like, I'm getting chills just thinking about it right now. And when I did that, and I got that feeling, and it was like at the heat of it, my wife literally woke up, reached over, and asked if I was okay, which I thought was just crazy to me as well. Like, she doesn't wake up in the middle of the night, man. You know, it was kind of like, that's one of those signs of like, maybe something woke her up and said, hey, something's going on, right?
Or there was enough of an energy disturbance that even like she felt it when she's not necessarily prone to energy like that. But I mean, if there's a shift, like even people that don't pay attention to that stuff, they'll feel something. They just won't know why, you know, they're feeling that.
Yeah. And that totally like, her doing that totally grounded me. And I, but I still couldn't shake the feeling completely. Right. So I got up, I went downstairs to make coffee and trying to clear my head and whatnot. And as soon as I got to the kitchen sink, man, I heard it again. The freaking owl started hooting. Right in my yard. It was like in my yard. It wasn't like in the woods. It was in my yard. And again, I literally said it out loud. I smiled and I said, there she is. And it literally felt like, the way I described it in my, is that it felt like an old foe showing up again this time, but I knew that I was like ready to go at this thing. And I picked up my phone and I began to read this prayer it's specifically for renouncing Lilith. Right. And I moved to the back door. I raised my voice and I'm literally reciting this out my back door at like 3:50 in the morning at this point, or like, 4 a.m. And as soon as I started doing that, man, this owl started going nuts, hooting and screeching, hooting louder, faster, but also like screeching. But I could feel whatever it was again, retreating, and eventually it was gone. And by the end of it, bro, I was just exhausted, but I felt like lighter. I felt like this entire weight had been lifted off me. It's like I had won a battle that I didn't even know I was fighting. Right. It's obviously one of the most intense experiences I've ever had, myself. And here's though, to circle back, the significance, because I went right back. I couldn't shake the time again, the 349, right? And something about it nagged at me and compelled me to go look it up. And I was drawn to Genesis 3, verses 4-9, right? Which reads, You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desired for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. When the eyes of both of them were opened, they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" That's 4 through 9. So it's this passage about temptation, knowledge, and the consequences for stepping outside of divine protection. The serpent's promise to Eve that eating the forbidden fruit would open her eyes echoes Lilith's themes of rebellion and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Just like Eve, my eyes were opened, but to what? To a dark energy that had haunted humanity for centuries, to something that tries to tempt us away from the divine. So that's basically the story, man.
Just to bring in something weird too, that I looked up what Lilith translated was during you talking about it a little bit, and it says in Hebrew language, texts the terms Lilith translate as night creature, night monster, night hag, or screech owl. So I found that kind of interesting that one of the exact translations is screech owl. And I mean, kind of connecting with the whole owl thing, assumably, if you kind of look at it from like the Hebrew context that, you know, it was Adam's first wife, it seems like to get casted out, it's a matter of acquiring knowledge or like wisdom. So it's like that owl concept kind of comes full circle continuously when you start bringing up this like Lilith concept on top of, again, like night creature, owl, like, and again, just the exact translation being screech owl, and you hearing like these screeches, like,
oh yeah,
it's one of those things. The more you dive into, like, the more pings there are, and it's like either one you can view it as coincidence, or on the other side, it's like nothing seems to be a coincidence if you kind of view it that there is this divine purpose or divine motive to everything, and free will is just a matter of you can side tangent, but you're still going to end up at these same path points.
Correct. I don't really believe in coincidence much anymore. You know,
the more you dive into this stuff, the more you don't.
No, yeah, and it just seems just like, oh my gosh. But
just out of curiosity too, have you heard any more owls at your house since this experience?
No.
Which makes it even weirder, because you said you lived there, didn't hear anything, and then you had multiple nights in a row where you're hearing the screech owl, and then this stops and it completely disappears.
Now
again.
There's none. Haven't heard one since. And all the other things, and now I keep, you know, it's kind of like making sure that everything's in repair. I keep saying certain prayers on a constant basis, you know, and whatnot, but I've had no incidents, and I feel just amazing, just great. Like, and I don't have, see, here's the other part of this. Is kind of crazy. And it's like the lessons, like karma's a vengeful bitch, right? I'm married to my wife, who I've been married to for over 20 years, and she's the love of my life. She's amazing. But I have 4 daughters. So somebody's trying to get me to learn something about something, right?
Hey, if you believe in like the whole concept of, you know, reincarnating again, you know, maybe there's something also that it isn't just this life, but maybe a previous life where you've had that like feminine oppression. So maybe it's trying to teach you the idea of like duality and balance, but it's kind of like before things can balance back out, the scales have to tip in one direction and then they kind of balance back out. So it's like you have to have that abundance of like feminine energy around you, but like good, positive feminine energy instead of that, you
correct.
know, repressive feminine energy to kind of readapt you into being comfortable around feminine energy and not viewing it necessarily as an oppressive source. But Lilith saw that and just completely took advantage of it. Because again, that little tiny little thing in your mind, and they'll just exploit the hell out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it all comes down to consent, right? I truly believe that this is why you don't open doors, right? You don't do things. So this whole situation, this whole experience, and then talking to some, you know, very intelligent people, especially with this podcast. I've talked to some great people that kind of gave me some guidance, and just thinking back about all the possible doors that you've opened and going back and shutting those to allow these things to have control over you and your life, right? And I've shut all the doors that I could think of, right? And then, so it's just it was enlightening and very educational experience as well. And I feel literally, I felt like a new man. No, pun intended. I literally, it was a great experience. Cause I don't feel that way anymore. I don't feel like, being held down or just tempted by anything. All the invasive thoughts are gone. Yeah. It was just amazing.
I mean, it also made you aware of like the astral realm because, when it comes to demonic powers, it's all about influence. And I feel like one of the easiest places to influence a human being isn't in the physical world, but rather like in their dreamscape. And especially when you are dealing with most guys, not saying everybody, but most guys, it's like you can get that acceptance, that welcome in through these dreams by giving a man a sexual encounter. Even if it ends up turning dark, it's like within a dream, most guys are like, she's beating me up, but at the same time though, like I'm kind of into this, because it's like this weird suppressive thing, so it's like that's the perfect doorway and opening in. But once people become aware of the fact that that's a doorway and opening, it feels like it's one of those things that these things will try to hit hard all at once. And because as soon as you become aware to it, then that's their main way to get in. And as soon as you block that doorway off, they're like, shit, what are we going to do now? It's like they have to unleash the floodgates and go for it all at once if they're going to try to go for it from that perspective. Yeah,
for sure. I would absolutely agree. Yeah. And I still have dreams. I wouldn't say like prophetic dreams by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely have, things are brought to light to me through my dreams, but it's not like world sweeping, but it's very personal. Right. So the way I look at that is it's, either God or, his folk that are talking to me, angels, whatever you want to call the light. I feel the light, I guess you could say, not anything bad. Talking about things that I should do or things I need to get up and pray about and whatnot.
It's because you let light into your heart where before you had like darkness in your heart. So that's what it attracted like an antenna. And now that you have the light in your heart, now it attracts the light back in.
Yes. And it's kind of getting more intense as the days, and weeks and months go on. So, yeah, man. And it's changing the world around me too, which is cool. Things are better, and everything from money to everything, man, is better. So
got that repressive weight lifted off as a whole. So now it's like you're able to expand and manifest. I don't want to necessarily say manifest, but good intentions lead to positive things in life. And if you have these like dark things in the back of your mind of like, I suck, I'm never going to be able to do this, blah, blah, blah. Like it's going to unfold into your real life.
Yep. Absolutely. Totally agree.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to rock some gear for one of your favorite podcasts, creatures, or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the SQUATCH Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspire Theory podcast. Welcome back to the show. Now let's dive right in. Say somewhat side tangenting. Some people think that these are connected. I don't know necessarily which perspective you come at with, not necessarily to Lilith, but kind of connected into like the biblical paradigm, because a lot of people have different theories on what these things could potentially be. But beforehand, we are talking about how you go out, you squatch, you've had a few Sasquatch encounters. Again, I don't know where your paradigm is kind of coming into it, but I'd love to kind of dive into your perspective of Sasquatch and some of your encounters with it or with them.
Yeah, man. I am not a dogmatic about, I'm not a blood and bone or a spiritual being. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I've had some, so the first run-in, that's what I call it. The first experience that I had with Sasquatch was when I was about 11 in the Boy Scouts. And we were camping in rural Illinois at a campsite that we went to all the time. A campground. It was just a huge campground on a place called Bloomington Lake. But either way, because that's where I grew up, was Illinois, till I was 13. So the run-in, that it was me and two other boys. We all experienced exactly the same thing. Didn't see anything per se, right? But we definitely ran into something. It was dark. The thing that hit us first was the smell. Horrifically bad, man.
How would you describe it? I got to ask, because I've had some experiences with this, and yeah, it always just fascinates me when it gets into the smell thing, because it seems like that's always the first thing that people will experience. But if you're not like aware of it, it's like sometimes people won't catch it till years later of like, oh, I may have had an encounter, and I do remember that skunky smell.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, like when they say skunk ape, it's like that, but yet so much worse. It's almost like there's also like this like decomp almost, or just really dirty ass something's rotting.
See, my description that I kind of got from the time that I experienced this is that it's like if you step into like a really stagnant, gross, nasty swamp and you like pull your boot up, that smell that you get from the mud when you first pull your boot up is the best way that I've been able to describe
bacteria stuff, right? Or whatever that is.
Stagnant bacteria, muddy, gross, decaying water smell.
Sewage, but it's that, yes, that, but it was kind of like mixed with like skunk. I would agree. That's pretty accurate. So we got hit with that, but it was like just overwhelming, like literally made my eyes water. And we smelled that. We had this creek that we had to jump to, and then we were gonna go under this hedgerow as we were running to dinner. We were late, and we had to leap this creek, and then there's like this hedgerow that you would go under. Then there was another hedgerow, and then there was this open field, and the cabins were on the other side of the field. Well, before we hit that first hedgerow, we smelt the smell, jumped the stream, and at that moment, the hedgerow in front of us like exploded. And like it was a sound. It was as much like an infrasound as it was like a sound, like a growling or a something, like you could feel it. And whatever was in front of us was massive. And there's no bears in that area, so it's not a bear. And we just took a direct like right-hand turn and just ran. Started, the other two boys were screaming, and we just ran. There's been other people that have had encounters in the same area, right? I don't know if there's any like actual visual sightings there, but that was my first experience. And second experience was very similar to the first, except for it was in Alaska. And I was in the Marines, and we were doing a drug interdiction mission up in like Denali, coincidentally is in the Alaska Triangle. Just saying.
Yeah, everybody knows that connection with Sasquatch beings, or Nantinaq, I think is what they call them up there.
The what?
Nantinaq? I think that's the word they call them up there.
Something like that, right? And very similar situation, but you had 7 heavily armed Marines shitting themselves because this freaking thing was in front of them. And again, it was dusky. Sun was going down. But this one, we wasn't just it was like a bluff charge, and the smell was horrific. Again, it was like a bluff charge, right? But you could always say, "Oh, it's a bear" or whatever. But it was not. It was. We're all of us guys that were in that situation convinced that it was because it was massive.
Did you guys get tall. Visual, or did you just kind of hear?
Yeah, but it was more of it was just like an outline kind of, you know what I mean? Like, not even like a head, but almost like shoulders, right? And they were tall. It was tall, whatever it was. And we were walking in grass that was like 5 feet tall. And it was way taller than that.
I'm going to assume that Sasquatch is probably like, not as, I guess we're all animals, even humans, if you really break it down. But, the farther north you get, the bigger animals get. So I'm going to assume that Sasquatch beings in Alaska are probably bigger than ones we're dealing with down here.
Allegedly, like you get these boreal, what a lot of people I've heard them call them boreal Sasquatch, which are just like, you get some of these suckers that are up like in the 10 feet, 10 foot, 1,000-pound. Could you imagine? I just...
The sheer strength of that thing, it could rip you in half.
The sheer presence of this thing, it just filled all the space. And it just took all the air out of the area. You know what I mean? Like, I know you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, definitely.
It just literally, and like, you can't remember any other sound. You can't remember anything other than this thing. And then it just as quickly retreated. And you could hear that it was bipedal. There's no doubt.
I'm assuming this thing probably was pushing infrasound onto you guys, so it was kind of giving you that totally disoriented feeling, and it probably had no intention of actually coming after you, but rather, again, just bluff charging to show its dominance and be able to get away from you.
Yeah, and so, yeah, absolutely. And then the incidents that I've had here in the Allegheny, like I go down to the Allegheny National Forest with a bunch of people. I'd call it a Bigfoot research group, right? And we've had multiple incidents, not like that though, but all mainly vocal and or like knocks, wood knocks, stuff like that. But vocalizations that are just, it's definitely an ape of some sort. At least that's what the vocalizations sound like, right? And the other side of that is one of my buddies who was a Marine as well. This last, so this was in October. I took him down, and literally he couldn't get over the fact. Literally, he's like, "Did I just hear monkeys in the Pennsylvania forest?" Like literally, that's what it sounded like. It was crazy. That incident, but it was just the vocal. And of course, so here's the other side of this, right? So we talk about some of the woo-woo supernatural type stuff with it. I'm with guys out there that are seasoned, some of these guys have been doing this 20 plus years. And we had a very good voice recorder, like a recorder that this guy's actually gotten vocalizations on the recorder prior to this, and other expeditions. Well, he had it sitting on top of my car, and it was, we were all like, holy shit. And we were so excited because we knew we got it on this recorder, right? Well, turns out when we get back to camp, first off, we forgot that he had the recorder on the roof. So we drove all the way back to camp, and it was still there. I don't know how, but it was still there.
I figured it was in the middle of the woods somewhere.
Recording thing, right? I mean, it was weird. Like there's something going on there. That was crazy. But he's like, oh shit. And he remembered, and it was still there. He couldn't believe it. But there was about a 6-minute block when we had where these sounds were. That was zero. You had no sounds. You didn't hear anything. You didn't even hear us talking. And then there was recording after that too. It was so bizarre.
See, I'm kind of curious sometimes if these things' vocal range might like hit a point where it almost like cancels out like all sound, because everybody who's dived into this knows that they have a ridiculous vocal range. And that's like, you dig into the Sierra sounds and you see that like they can hit highs and lows the humans are nowhere near. So I mean, I know that you can play like certain specific tones where you can, it's just like a constant tone where like you won't hear it, but it can drown out like all other sound. So I'm curious if these things are able to almost hit layers within.
You know what, I'll bring that up to him too, to put it through like audio software. I bet he hasn't done that, but if you put it through audio software, you'd still be able to see it. Right? You know what I mean? You'd be able to see the frequency.
I'm curious if they could hit layers too, where it's like they could be hitting out this cancel layer, but at the same time be hitting this layer that you're able to hear, but any recording device, it would like cancel it out because it's hitting in a certain range. Right.
Yeah, maybe. We have this research area, which this is the same Marine butt guy that I was telling you about. It's about 100 acres in the Tug Hill Plateau. And I'm not sure that there's a resident population of Sasquatch there per se. I know that there's definitely transient stuff going on there. But he's been bluff charged in his backyard by something it was like very similar to the Alaskan experience that I had. And he has 2 Great Pyrenees guard dogs. They're literally guard dogs. They're not, pets. They are pets, but he has them trained as guard dogs because his wife is home alone a lot. And that was one of the things that he's done. And these dogs basically turned tail and ran.
I've heard endless stories of like the most fearsome hunting dogs, and they'll have these experiences and they'll take off to the car and be hiding underneath the car with their tail between their legs.
And one of the dogs too, they won't even react anymore. So like he's had a couple other incidents in around his house. These dogs bark at everything. And when he had there's 2 separate incidents where they didn't even react. They didn't bark. They didn't do shit. They just stood there and like sat down and like.
They're like, I'm doing my job. I'm telling you the direction it's in. I'm not doing anything else.
Right, but I'm not doing anything. Like,
over there.
And they like every time, like they know me, and every time I pull up, they're barking their heads off. It's crazy. Like anything, the wind blows sideways just a little bit, and some leaves, they're barking. And he's had something tap on his window, dogs didn't even freaking react. It's crazy. But I had another, so this is one of those places, I don't know if I'll ever do it again, but, I stayed out, we have a campsite out there, but we have it because we've had so many different, like a push down tent incident where like, sleeping in the tent and it was like pushed down on top of my buddy.
That's like probably one of the scariest experiences that I can imagine with Sasquatch. Like, I don't know why, but that just hits home to me because it's like you're in the middle of just openness, and all you have that you think is protection subconsciously is literally like a thin piece of fabric. Like one of the scariest moments in, like, you know, the Sasquatch horror movies is that moment in Bluff Creek where they're sitting in the damn tent, and it's like a 10-minute scene of them just basically trying to sit in the middle of the tent as like it's getting smacked and stuff. Like, I've had a bunch of people describe those experiences, not of most Sasquatch experiences. I think I'd rather be bluff charged than be sitting in a tent knowing that something is right there, and the only thing separating us is a thin piece of fabric, a barely waterproof piece of fabric.
So now we have this area, this little campsite that we have out there. We call the place Broken Bridge Research Area because there's two sides to this property, and there's a stream that runs right through the middle. And it's really, it's deep. Like, the stream is deep in spots. It's like you really can't walk across it. It's not very user friendly, I guess you could say, to try and get from one side to the other. And he had this bridge that was there, and he's reinforced it and stuff throughout the years. Well, I'm telling you, something tore it down. It didn't just fall into it didn't just, rot out and fall down. That's not what happened here. Something actually tore pieces of it down. So we couldn't get from one side to the other, because the other side is spooky as all get out. Like, you just know something's going on over there. And we've had both vocalizations and knocks, whoops and knocks come from that side. And that it is there's nothing for miles in any of the directions. You know what I mean? So it's not people.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this break, if you might be interested in joining a growing community of like-minded individuals, then pop on over to the Open Minds Media Telegram, a place to discuss high strangeness, conspiracies, and anything else on your mind. Bizarre and open-minded individuals always welcome. Link to join available down in the show description. And we are back, so let's get back to it. This is a normal trope with Sasquatch, the whole, like, somebody tries to build a bridge, somebody tries to build a road, whatever, and these things just tear it down and say, hell no, you're not coming over here.
Hell no. So we have this fence around this, to get back to the story. We have this fence now around the campsite. It's got one little opening where we can walk in and out. And now if we ever stay out there, we put a trail cam right there, like inside the perimeter. Not that the fence is going to stop anything, but it at least keeps them off of the tent, right? And what we do is we put a trail cam right on the opening. And it seems to work so far. But one night I was out there by myself, and I had just bought this new thermal camera, right? And this thing's awesome. It's literally like this little thermal thing that you plug into your iPhone, and it works so well. It's amazing. The picture is crystal clear. You can flip through all these different modes, whether it's white hot, black hot, reds, rainbow. It's like the rainbow, man. It's awesome. And I've tested it out on a million different things. It's just fantastic. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bait this sucker in tonight, and I'm going to get it on, because I'm super smart, and this is just how we do it. So I was going to funnel it in using cameras to kind of channel where it's going to go, because I'm convinced they can see infrared, because they know just how to stay out of the infrared cameras on the trail cams, right? Or infrared camera in general. At least and I'll just say adults know, right? So I left this one space that was about 10 feet wide, where if I open the tent, I'm pointed right at it, right? And all I have to do is have this thing on, and it's going to be, man, I've got Sasquatch on thermal, right? And it works to a T. And around 2:00 in the morning that night, something very large came up to the edge of the the fence, which is about 10 feet from the tent, right? And the only spot where you couldn't, now, like there weren't footprints or anything the next morning, but you could tell something. There was a disturbance in the leaves and whatnot. But I had my cell phone. I have two different iPhones that I use for this. And I had them both fully charged, and they don't have any service, but they're just like, dead phones at this point, right? Without a SIM card, because they're phones that we had. So one's like an iPhone 12 and the other one's like an iPhone X, right? And I use them dedicated just for video. And I had this thing already, popped it on. I could hear it out there. I opened the tent and the fucking phone's dead. I reach back, I grab the other one, plug it in, it powers up. As soon as I lift it up to video, it's dead too. It's unbelievable. Just drained. Both of the phones. They were fully charged. And then they both got drained. So, I don't know, man.
See, a lot of people kind of chalk this up to like a paranormal side of Bigfoot. Maybe it is partially paranormal, but I'm kind of curious if the infrasound could possibly have an effect on these types of things. Or, I mean, even getting into like the woo-woo side of Sasquatch, people kind of get into like the portal walking concept. And assumably there's going to be some type of like energy transference that happens, even with like paranormal stuff. When that happens, that energy gets sucked back and forth between that. And I mean, with Sasquatch stuff too, like a lot of people like to pick a camp that is either woo Sasquatch or flesh and blood, but I think it could definitely be both, because even within humans, we're physical, but we're also spiritual beings. So why can't that same thing be said for other things?
People talk about getting zapped all the time too, and these things, some of them getting talked to telepathically. And I mean, I don't discount anything anymore at all. And I'll never be the guy that's going to die on that hill unless I know in my heart, you know what I mean? And I just don't. There's something's going on, but what that is exactly, I have no idea. I love all the different theories, whether Nephilim, there were spawn of Nephilim, or there's so many different there's so many different theories and stories. And you know what? I will not discount any of them, because we don't freaking know. We just don't.
I mean, if these things are something old and they're on a different evolutionary chain or whatever, if they're just something old in general, I mean, one theory that I've kind of thrown a few times is like the whole Tower of Babel concept. Like, I almost kind of wonder if telepathic communication may have been something that was a lot more prevalent. And with the whole Tower of Babel thing, it wasn't that like everybody spoke one language and then everybody got thrown apart. It was rather that everybody knew how to communicate telepathically, and they were like, boom, here you go.
Have to speak.
Yeah, and then there wasn't speaking, and then that's when the languages developed, was because, all right, you guys can't be telepathic anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? That's absolutely viable theory, in my opinion. I mean, there's even evidence that is kind of true. It's not great evidence, but it's something, right? It's not just a theory. So,
I mean, even within animals, I feel like there is some form of, maybe not that complicated, but there is some form of like telepathic communication between animals. And maybe it's something that was just kind of blocked off for humans in particular, because it's like animals seem to be able to interact without being able to make sounds. And it's not just strictly expressions and stuff. I know bees and everything, they have their thing where they dance and move certain ways, but amongst the animal kingdom, I definitely feel like there's simplified telepathic abilities, as in just simply like, stay away, my area.
And I think in my opinion, if you're going to look at any type of animal for that, look at like whales. Whales, porpoises, killer whales, the orcas, the whole whale genus, whatever they call that species, if there's anything that could probably telepathically, I mean, they're so smart. Like if you hook them up to electrodes, they're just as smart as humans. They just don't have opposable thumbs.
And they have a different way of communicating that,
Absolutely. And so is it all clicks? Is it all whatever? But I bet if you got under the layers there, I think there's somebody that's tried to study all that, and they have a definite language. It's just a matter of, is it language or our definition of stuff is so narrow anyway, let's be honest.
I mean, we're looking at it from the human perspective that language has to be what we're speaking right now, but it doesn't mean that everything communicates the same way. Like, I've even talked about this with like consciousness of plants. It's like they're able to communicate and stuff. It's just, it's not necessarily they're less intelligent than you. It's just they have a different means of interacting and communicating that we don't understand. And just because we don't understand it, we say that it's less complex than what we do. Yeah. It's just a totally different form.
Mycelium and fungus and stuff like that. Like, come on. Trees, and there's got to be some sort of, there's something to it all, right?
I had one guy who
James Cameron showed us in freaking Avatar, right?
I had one guy who was a heathen that came on kind of talking about like the Norse belief on a lot of this stuff, and he was basically saying you have to like extend it with like the period of life. So like, we live in this period. This is like how we view time and how we interact and how we hear things. But if you spread out a tree's life, that its life is, a couple hundred years, whatever, like you have to try to put that perspective, but into our view, where he basically said, if you slowed everything down, then you start catching like vibrations and frequencies, and you realize that it's like their language. It's slowed down because their life process is a lot longer. So it's like, imagine them living our same life experience, but it's in their time frame. And then that's like their communication would be a lot slower to kind of fit that time frame. And I've found that interesting, at least like from. Well,
so time is so fluid anyway, in my opinion. Plus a lot of it's a construct, right? In theory, right? Now we do have what, the Bible says and this, that, and the other thing, but also, we had folks that were living to be 1,000 years old, right, in the Bible. Also, on top of that, I'm not saying the current time that we live in, that the majority of the world sees as time and calendar, was developed by man. Right.
And it doesn't even necessarily work, because that's why you have to add leap year in, is because it doesn't fit correctly.
At the end of the day, I mean, like, I think the Chinese have a totally different calendar, right? The Mayans obviously have a totally different calendar. I think even like the Thai, I think Thailand has a whole nother thing, and it's like 23,000 years ago. I can't remember what year it is in that calendar, but I mean, even by the church, if you look at the Orthodox Church, they're still on is it the Justinian calendar or the Gregorian calendar?
I think we're on the Gregorian calendar. I think
so they're still going on the Justinian calendar, and that's a whole nother fabricated thing as well.
There was one that they were saying that it's like 28 days. I'm not 100% sure on this one, but I believe it's like 13 months and 28 days in each particular month. And it's like, it's a perfect division where it fits with the perfect time frame of like how the years, and like you wouldn't need leap year if you use this calendar.
Why are we changing stuff, right? So the Julian calendar, so the Julian calendar still, so today is December 4th, but in the Julian calendar, today is November 21st. Is a solar calendar. Duh. I mean, come on. Like, what are we changing reinventing the wheel here? 365 days in a year. We'll see. The Julian calendar says that it's got a leap day every 4th year as well. So I don't know, man. But there is who knows. I'm just saying it's a construct, and whether it's from this, that, or the other thing, time is all relative. And I think in the, other realms, time doesn't even exist. Right. I mean, that's kind of what we're told. Is we are, at some point you're beyond time and space.
They say like our reality is constructed with time, dimension, length, whatever. The next one up, it's like time is basically like it's malleable. Like it's not definite. It's only
Right,
definite
exactly.
from
And
our
you can
dimensional perspective.
You can see everything and nothing all at the same time.
It's
you can see across all timelines and all things at all. I can't even imagine that much information.
a good way to describe it. If you've ever seen the movie The Arrival, like the newer one with like the UFOs where they come and the woman starts getting pieces of time and everything like that. That kind of describes it pretty well. That it's like time's like this linear loop. That it's like we're viewing it from this perspective, but if you're outside of our dimension, you can basically just look down at the whole loop and then view at any specific point in this timeline that you'd want to view.
Yeah. I mean, I totally look at us as just smart monkeys, dude. Like, and with our actual understanding, like, of things, right?
We've created our understanding, especially with time. It's like we only understand it because we've created the paradigm to understand it, but it doesn't exist outside of
anything about anything, man. And the faster that people realize that, like I go even as deep into like people. One of my daughters, they're all teenagers at this. I have 4 daughters running from age 16 up to 29, right? And they'll come home from school and just have some kind of nonsense that they're talking about this, that, and the other thing. And one of the big things, as we know, is like environmental stuff. And I was like, I look at environmental stuff. A lot of it is just complete human arrogance. Like as if we may be like, you can affect your local environment, right? But the overall environment of things, the arrogance that we have as a species to think that we actually are in control of this stuff is staggering. And I use one example for that. And it's two volcanic eruptions, and it's Krakatoa and Pinatubo, the latest eruptions from both of these. Pinatubo was in the 80s, and I can't remember exactly when Krakatoa was. Those two eruptions put more CO2, and I say CO2, but they put more greenhouse gas into the atmosphere than humans since the beginning of time ever.
But see, the other mixed up part about it too is that coming from somebody that works in cultivation, it's like we pump CO2 into the rooms because it helps plants grow. So it's like you dig back into like the prehistoric times and they say that the CO2 in the air was significantly higher, which is why the plants were fucking monsters.
We're so huge.
So it's like you're killing the environment with CO2, but yet the plants breathe CO2. So it's like...
Right, exactly. Well, it just makes it all heat up.
And plants love that shit too, and in turn they start producing more oxygen.
Exactly. So like, I mean, just the different things. Yeah. So you know what I'm saying.
It's pollution that's the problem. They just target it totally different. Like pollution is the issue. It's not carbon dioxide.
Correct. And who knows the particulate, all the things. And then you uncork the whole. Do we live on a sphere? Do we live on a flat earth? Do we, all the nonsense. And the only thing that I do know is that we don't know anything. Right? That's the wisdom. Seriously. As soon as you think that you know anything that's outside of yourself for sure, right? You know what you think for sure, right? You know you. And sometimes we don't.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes not even that.
Even the story I just shared earlier with Lilith, sometimes that's completely influenced. But the one thing that you know and that you can control is you, for the most part. Let's say that with a little asterisk, right? For the most part, it is you. And thinking that you can influence and have control over other things is just... We don't know nothing, man. We really don't. It's and that, but people can't handle that. They just can't handle the fact, or be that, hopeless, or we have this idea that if we control it, we control it. And that's just not the case.
It gives people peace of mind to feel like they're in control of the situation, even though they may not be.
And in all honesty, I feel better when I don't think I control anything. I just control what I do. And I wish people would do that more often.
It's too stressful to try to control everything. Like, you know,
dude, it's crazy. I just don't understand. Like, why do you want to be in charge of so much stuff? Like, I mean, if that's your path, then that's your path, right? But I, over the last 20 years, have totally just grown as a person. I basically, you know, we all have some semblance of ego, but I'm a firm believer the ego is the enemy, and you just need to be open to everything and anything to the universe and take it all in and let things come as they're presented to you, right?
Say if you control every situation, then you block yourself off from outside experiences, because at that point you're only experiencing the things that you've controlled yourself to experience. Yeah.
You're literally filtering everything. And man, the sky is brighter without a filter, you know? Everything's brighter without a filter. And I mean, why would you? Yeah. Rose-colored glasses, man.
Yeah, but narrowing your lenses, man.
Yeah, for sure. It sucks. So, yeah, I let go. Just let go. Like, what's the let go and let God, you know, the old adage.
What was that one that used to be on t-shirts everywhere back in like the early 2000s? Keep calm and chug along or something like that?
Yeah, keep calm and do everything, right? So like they had there was always something. Keep calm and you know, whatever, live life, or you know, they had a billion of them.
Keep calm and go squatching. Let's just go with that one.
Yeah, man. I mean, come on, dude. Because honestly, let's be honest. If you don't like getting out in the woods, you don't like getting out in the woods, but there's nothing like getting out in the woods and just walking around, man. Even if you don't see anything, you don't do anything. It's just,
you don't love being out in the woods. I don't know why the hell you're squatching in the first place.
Right. Exactly. It's crazy.
Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you guys enjoy the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now back with that deep conversation you crave. I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, man. I know that you were kind of just saying some words of wisdom, but just to kind of leeway into the end, if there's any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on any of the listeners out there, what might it be?
Yeah, so literally, I think the biggest thing is stop taking yourself so damn seriously. You know, and so much of this, I think, yeah, we've talked about a lot of this. It's literally ego is the enemy. Be a good human to yourself, your family, and others, and don't try and control everything. And let life kind of happen, right? Live in the present. Don't live in the future. Don't live in the past. It'll all work out better if you just, you know, live for the now. Truly.
The past is a memory and the future is a construct. The only thing that truly ever exists is the present.
Is the present, correct. And just don't, this is all just a thing, man. It's stuff. Don't let, you know, it's very Tyler Durden, Fight Club-ish, right? Don't let your stuff own you, but that's what our entire society seems to be about. And break out of it, man. Don't let the construct control what you're doing. I mean, you can use every analogy in the world, every stinking movie, whether it's Fight Club or The Matrix or you know, all the stuff. And I really just open up your mind and be open to all this stuff, and don't take stuff. I mean, obviously life, limb, and eyesight, that's a big deal. If something happening to you that deals with that, and danger to yourself or your family, but don't take stuff so seriously.
Enjoy the time while you got it here, because, I mean, you know, a lot of
Exactly.
people believe in reincarnation, but, I mean, no matter what, you're supposed to be here for a specific reason, so enjoy your time that you got here.
Exactly. And none of us know when our time's going to end, truly. So live life, man. Love the ones that love you. And it's, all the fluffy nonsense that we pump out, right?
Ain't that the truth?
Again, don't take it all so serious. So
That's the problem with society nowadays, man. Everybody takes themselves too seriously, and that's why you can't make a joke without everybody getting offended.
no, you can't. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
But yet, on the other side, we talk about mental health and all this kind of stuff in today's society, but that we don't want to consider the fact or talk about the fact that the whole reason why comedy, why jokes were developed is it's a coping mechanism for people to understand things that they don't understand. So
Yes,
it's like,
correct.
if you want to be pro mental health, you have to be pro letting people make jokes, because that is people's coping mechanism and way of understanding things.
Absolutely. Yep. And when you shut down gyms and whatnot, gyms and churches for a virus, but you leave open McDonald's and liquor stores.
Can't shut those liquor stores down. They saw what happened last time.
You know what I mean? Though? How can I take things seriously if that's the case?
It's just they want you to be dumb and silent at home. That was the idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Living by their calendar.
And man, this was a wonderful conversation. I definitely got to have you back on the show another time, because I feel like we can just kind of get into stuff, man. We probably got a lot more stuff we can definitely dive into.
Oh, dude, I can talk for hours, but we got to get you on my show too, on our show. So,
Oh, absolutely, man.
I'll reach out, and yeah, man, it was fun.
And if anybody wanted to come and find your show, they want to come and find your blog, all the different stuff you do on the internet, man, where can everybody come and find all your pages, your work, and contact you possibly?
Literally on all the podcast platforms, it's Broadcasting Seeds, YouTube, Spreaker, Podbean, Apple, everything. I'm transferring stuff over to Rumble too, so we can get some stuff over there too. And then, anything, Broadcasting Seeds, period. Or you can just Google my name, and I'm like the first 3 pages. So
Isn't that a good feeling when you get to a point where you can take over the Google search?
yeah, for sure. Like I kind of own my name, right? Like it's crazy, but yeah, man, it's Broadcasting Seeds, and it's everywhere. That's what it is. So there's no weird underscores or things like that.
And of course, I will include all your links in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And man, awesome. I appreciate you making the time to come on today, sharing your experiences, your story, and being so open about your experiences and stories, man. Opens the doorway for a lot of new people to be able to feel comfortable sharing their experiences, man.
Absolutely. Broadcasting Seeds, baby. Planting the seeds in the people's minds. Open it up.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through the email, which is inquiriesofallrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram or Facebook are the ones that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available on the Linktree, of course. You can use that for 1, contacting me, and 2, of course, reporting an encounter if there's anything that you guys would like to share on the show or possibly have me investigate. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through the hotline, which is 313-364-1551. And you guys can either call and leave a voicemail there, or you guys can text that line, whatever happens to be easier for you guys. And if you guys have some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show. I Know Squatch, Snarly Yow Natural Products, Cryptotheology, and Big Ape Threads. And our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More info on that is, of course, available down in the show description. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show today is all available on the Linktree, which is available down in that show description too. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. I'm Dr. D's taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey. With a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries inquiries of our reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to inquiries of our reality.